Hey, did you see Inside Out 2 this weekend? So did everybody else. And as did I. Good stuff. Loved it. As good as the first one? Not sure. I'm not sure if it really can be. Just like by design. I think that the first Inside Out like set a real bar in terms of sad kids movies. And also just in terms of plot setup, where if you make your bar, how sad can we make this next one? You're just going to be like ending the world by like movie number 3 or 4 or whatever. And, you know, do you really want to do that, or you just want to tell the stories honestly? And in this case, I think they made the choice to tell the story honestly. Good decision. Like the first movie, the storyline is not just dealing with, oh, it's sad because of our setup. It's sad because the specific story is about sad. Like literally, the secondary main character is sadness. It's right there in the premise. And also, it's dealing with a setup that, while somewhat familiar, is not necessarily always universally applicable. First movie is not just about the character of sadness, it is situationally in the exterior sequences about an 11-year-old who is coping with like a mild depressive episode so badly that she almost runs away from home into what could be a disastrously dangerous situation. Sad stuff, also not necessarily sad stuff that every kid deals with. You can't like keep upping the ante in each successive movie in the same way unless you're doing like a historical thing where the point is that this character is just going to drift from one depressing situation to another. And I don't think anyone wants to watch like Inside Out cross up Forrest Gump kind of thing. Like, the point of this particular property for Pixar seems to be showing kids how to cope with varieties of emotional response, not just how much can we depress everyone with this movie. And in the context of this sequel, it's about teenage emotions, puberty, growing up, maybe not as directly in the form of a teenage comedy movie like Turning Red, which is a different movie than this, and there's probably going to be a lot of comparisons to it. I don't think it's like a fair comparison between the two. Craft-wise, overall, like enjoyment, I think I would, like, between the two, prefer Turning Red. But this is a different sort of movie. This is definitely a kids movie versus an older kids or teenage middle school movie. What I think is kind of fun about this one, maybe in a way that, watching as a critic, that Pixar didn't necessarily intend, is that the new characters, we're once again doing the storyline of it. Half of the movie is set in this sort of Herman's Head. Wow, God, does that reference date me? Holy shit. Does anyone remember that Herman's Head was a thing? I remember Herman's Head was on at the same time as The Simpsons, and that they would, like, make Herman's Head references because the same era, not, like, opposite each other. They were on the same network. That Herman's Head was, that characters, actors from The Simpsons were on Herman's Head, and they would like reference that they were also on this vastly inferior show that was also on the same network. And now that probably plays like a thing that no one even knows existed. Yeah, that's something I should mention in the other piece. Well, anyway, we're still doing the same premise where there's these emotion characters representing various states of emotion or aspects of a personality inside the head of this now teenage girl character, dominated by individual emotions: joy, anger, sadness, fear, envy. In this one, now as a teenager, her head is invaded by a slew of teenage-specific emotions, what the film depicts as teenage-specific emotions: anxiety, ennui, embarrassment, and envy, which seems like a much more kind of shallow caricature depiction of how emotions would be. Like the original set seems like there's like some real care put into, you know, what would these characters be like? Does it matter if they are staged as male or female characters? Whereas these new ones, anxiety, ennui, envy, and embarrassment, are basically caricatures of teenagers as seen by adults. You know, they're good characters, don't get me wrong. They're a lot of fun. I like the voices. I like the designs are great. Embarrassment is a riot. I like that they make no bones about ennui, specifically explaining that, no, actually, I'm just boredom, but with a French accent, because it's funny, and that's who's, I think it's Adela Sarchopoulos is voicing the character. But as compared to, like, the very classical Pixar tender, loving care put into how do we get the original emotions exactly right into these full, richly developed characters, because they are both childlike and also children's view of adults doing their best. And of course the themes in the first one are, you know, trying to, you know, rip your heart out about bing bong imagination and change and missing, the homestead that you grew up on and moving to the big, and all these big emotions that clearly is more in the general classical Pixar wheelhouse. Whereas in this one is more of a teenager story of fitting in with a friend group versus a new friend group, and the kid is going off to hockey camp, and it's almost a Mean Girls story. Are you going to abandon the old friend group for the new friend group? And the stakes are, by necessity, not as dire, and again, I think that's the right decision. But it's very clear that there's a divide between the original film's 5 emotions and the new 4 that show up here as the lovingly crafted toy story for a new generation. We have put hours into these new characters. We've crafted them with the finest child psychiatrists that we can get. And then these new ones, and I'm sure they put every bit as much care into them, but they have a distinct air of adult creators having to come up with what are the teenage puberty emotions and going, well, we all know what teenagers are, right? They're basically annoying and obnoxious and ruled by anxiety, and you just kind of deal with them. So they're all basically just these angst goblins who show up and fuck everything up for the other characters, and eventually just need to learn how to calm the fuck down. Like, whereas it's very hard to imagine a dumb version of the first Inside Out that isn't insultingly bad because it's such a carefully crafted music box of a thing. Whereas this one, it's very easy to imagine a less good version where the solution is just that Joy and everyone show back up in Act 2 with a gigantic Zoloft and just knock the others out with it. Yeah, I kind of wonder if there's if they actually get to number 3, if they forego the new emotions anyway, and someone just walks in and just says, "Hi, my name is Weed, everything is just going to be fine." Yes, I recognize that's a quintessential boring Gen X guy joke. I'm sorry, I'm a boring Gen X guy. This is spinning off the rails. Anyway, yeah, so our premise here is that Riley has her new teenage emotions. They have exiled the original emotions. This turns out to be sort of problematic because she is heading into a camp situation where she's basically going to have to make her decision thanks to some plot contrivances that don't, to their credit, feel exactly like plot contrivances about how she's going to interact with a new friend group that could very well be like her future high school friend group, or spend some time with her potentially exiting original childhood friend group. This is giving her some anxiety, which of course has generated the main new emotion, anxiety, who is trying to run things in her head. As we more or less established without saying it out loud in the first one, the emotions aren't really necessarily emotions so much as personality avatars that manage one specific emotion but also have emotions themselves. A lot of the first film was about Joy being the main character of her story, both the antagonist and protagonist. This one is very much about anxiety in a secondary role, going through her protagonist and antagonist role, being antagonistic to the original emotions, but also trying to do what she thinks is the right thing, which is acting as a constant forward thinker, which the other emotions have not been for any of their period, because Riley's been a child beforehand. Anxiety's role is essentially as a constant predictive mode character, basically pulling like a Doctor Strange and Endgame version, but not coherently seeing potential futures and trying to map out the right way to go, and is almost constantly getting it wrong, but not in a intentionally destructive way until it is destructive to both Anxiety herself and the other characters, and eventually needs to be pulled out of this for the universal theme of any Pixar movie, that everyone needs to get along, work together, and find a middle path forward, because these movies so rarely have genuine antagonists that are not the main character's own personal flaws working against them, because why mess with success? Anxiety's a great character. Ennui is very funny for basically her one joke that she shows up to do, which again, it gets a nice lampshade put on it. Embarrassment is a great visual gag who eventually gets a spoken gag, to the point where I actually didn't look up who this voice was, and then when it came through I was like, okay, well, that was the perfect voice for that. Feels like they don't really have much for Envy to do as a character. I like that they this is very easy. It would be very easy for Envy to be like a silent villain, because we generally think of Envy as an evil emotion, but in a consistent theme for this series is that there aren't evil emotions. So I like that Envy's deal is essentially to be excited and to almost represent want, and to basically be the quiet voice for anxiety. Basically, she's there so anxiety has someone to talk to during the darker parts of her own arc. The other characters, their arc is similar to the first movie, but now they're all on the quest, and I really like that. It is fun to see them not regress, and to see them just continue forward and do their thing. It is, again, not as sad as the first, and I also like that decision. This will sound almost like a lessening comparison, because this movie actually is only just okay, the movie I'm about to talk about, but it reminds me similarly of Monsters University, which I was thinking about earlier this week for unrelated reasons, in that there isn't a lot of, like, wonderful to say about Monsters University. It's a just fine movie, but it took guts to make that a just fine movie, because there really was no way to make a big, meaningful prequel, or really probably sequel to Monsters, Inc., because Monsters, Inc. kind of rested its whole conceit on the idea that not that much important actually happened to these characters before the plot of the first movie, and that afterwards things were basically gonna be okay, that their world was basically functional before and it's basically functional after, and that's just kind of it. It was an everyman, workaday, middle of the road movie about a brief almost interruption in that. So the sequel basically said, well, okay, let's just make a just okay movie about two guys in school, and that's it. And that took guts, because they very easily could have concocted some kind of big mythology lore thing and fucked it all up and wrecked those characters, and they didn't do that. And this movie doesn't go and try to find itself another Bing Bong. There's a minute early on where I thought, oh, this is what that's going to be, and instead it's like, nope, we're doing a different thing here. We're doing a milder teenage thing rather than trying to break your heart all over again. It gets up towards Act 3, and it gets to a point where I think that there is a pretty, okay, that's what the stakes are. Okay, because adults will look at what almost happens and say, oh, wow, that could have been really, really wrong. I'm glad that those characters got out of that specific situation. Everyone gets the sad stuff, right, and the stakes of what happens with, like, the lost memories stuff in the first movie, and what almost happens should Riley have gone through with the running away plan in the first one. Whereas in this one, I think that the oh shit, that could have been a real disaster implications will sail right over younger kids, and I think that adults and teenagers will have a, okay, here's how you manage this conversation in this one. But it's not quite as much of a, okay, hey, open up heart, punch, like the first one. And it's good. It's a different movie, and that is important. I almost hope they don't do more of these. I think that, like, a kid and a teenager version of this and brief glimpses of what adulthood looks like for this whole universe is enough, because I don't know where else you take this. I think they kind of explore, like, this is the workings of this and the implications as much as they need to. I don't really think I need to know what, like, the old age version of this looks like, because I feel like anything else to explore with this, like, I don't need to know what senility looks like here. I don't need to know what death looks like here. I think that would just be doing the smart thing that this doesn't do in terms of trying to artificially generate sadness because we've decided this is our Make You Cry franchise. And I think this is an absolutely good enough, like the excellent version of good enough would be my description for this one. So call this, I feel like I give this, like, review out, like, too much this year, but maybe I'm just seeing the right movies. Yeah, so call this another 8 out of 10. I thought this was great, and no one needs me to tell them to go see this one, because everybody always says, yeah, 8 out of 10 for Inside Out 2. Go check it out.